Welcome to Freakonomics by Stephen D. Levitt and Stephen J. Dubner. This book challenges how we see the world, revealing that when you peel back the layers of modern life, things are rarely as simple as they seem. It isn't about lofty economic theories or stock markets. Instead, it's about exploring everyday puzzles and applying economic tools to uncover the hidden truths beneath. The introduction opens with a stark reminder of the early 1990s, a time when crime was a constant fear in America. Headlines painted a bleak future with superpredators lurking in cities, teenagers with no conscience, and crime spiraling out of control. Experts, journalists, and even politicians sounded the alarm. The country was heading for chaos. Forecasts were grim. Criminologists like James Allen Fox even predicted that teen murders would double. Then, something strange happened. Crime didn't just slow down. It plummeted. Homicide rates dropped by more than 50%, and other crimes followed. What caused this shocking turnaround? Conventional wisdom pointed to better policing, stricter gun laws, and a booming economy. These explanations made perfect sense. They were reassuring. If crime could be controlled by specific strategies, then society had the power to keep it at bay. But Levitt argues that none of these were the real reason. Instead, a distant and unexpected factor had quietly reshaped society: the legalization of abortion after Roe v. Wade in 1973. Levitt introduces us to a woman named Norma McCorvey, later known as Jane Roe, who sought an abortion she couldn't legally obtain. Her case reached the Supreme Court, and with the Roe v. Wade decision, abortion became legal nationwide. What does this have to do with crime? The authors explain that children born into adverse circumstances, poverty, single-parent households, teenage mothers are statistically more likely to commit crimes. When abortion became accessible, millions of children who might have grown up in these challenging environments were never born. By the 1990s, when these children would have reached their prime crime-committing years, the pool of potential criminals had quietly shrunk. This example highlights a powerful idea that runs through the book. Dramatic effects often have distant, hidden causes. The experts completely missed this connection. And Levitt doesn't stop there. He tells us that the tools of economics, when applied creatively, can explain the world in ways we don't expect. These tools hinge on data and incentives. Economists study how people respond to incentives, whether economic, moral, or social. Understanding these incentives can reveal why we do what we do, from cheating on a test to paying taxes or deciding whether to commit a crime. The introduction also challenges the idea that conventional wisdom is reliable. People tend to accept explanations that feel right or are widely believed, but those explanations are often wrong. Levitt compares this to peeling back layers of a mystery to discover what's really going on. He insists that numbers don't lie. They strip away biases and assumptions, leaving us with surprising insights. This is where Freakonomics begins, with the promise that, by looking at the world through the right lens, even the most mundane questions can reveal something extraordinary. Why do drug dealers still live with their moms? Why do real estate agents sell their own homes differently than yours? What really caused crime to drop? Levitt and Dubner take us on a treasure hunt for answers, armed with data, curiosity, and a knack for asking the right questions. So, if morality represents how people wish the world worked, economics reveals how it actually works. Prepare to see the world differently. Freakonomics is about to show you the hidden side of everything. At its core, Freakonomics teaches us one simple truth: people respond to incentives. Whether economic, social, or moral, incentives shape human behavior, and sometimes they lead to unexpected consequences like cheating. This chapter begins with an experiment conducted at daycares in Haifa, Israel. Parents were constantly picking their children up late, so the daycare introduced a small fine, $3 for every late pickup. Logic says this should work. Financial penalties should deter parents from arriving late. Instead, the opposite happened. Late pickups increased. Why? Because the fine replaced a moral incentive, feeling guilty about inconveniencing the staff, with an economic incentive that turned the guilt into a simple transaction. For just $3, parents could buy off their lateness. This example introduces us to the darker side of incentives: cheating. Whenever there's a system with stakes, whether it's test scores, money, or status, some people will try to manipulate it. But who cheats? And how can you prove it? To find answers, Levitt explores two very different groups: school teachers and sumo wrestlers. In the Chicago public school system, teachers faced enormous pressure to improve student scores on standardized tests. High scores meant praise, job security, and even bonuses. Low scores could mean probation or job loss. With so much at stake, some teachers cheated not by helping students during the test but by changing answers after the fact. Levitt developed an algorithm to spot patterns in the test results. For instance, some classrooms showed unusually high success on the hardest questions, while students missed easier ones. Others demonstrated dramatic one-year spikes in scores, only to see them drop back down the following year. By analyzing data, Levitt uncovered teachers who had erased wrong answers and filled in the correct ones. Cheating teachers were caught, but the system itself was to blame. High-stakes incentives turned honest teachers into cheaters. So, how do sumo wrestlers fit in? Like school teachers, they operate in a world where incentives matter. Sumo wrestling is Japan's national sport and embodies honor, tradition, and discipline. Matches are often life-defining because a wrestler's rank determines his entire career. A wrestler with an 8-7 record, 8 wins, 7 losses, maintains his rank, while a 7-8 record is devastating. Levitt analyzed thousands of matches and found something suspicious. Wrestlers on the brink of losing their rank mysteriously won matches against higher-ranked opponents far more often than expected. These findings suggest a culture of collusion. Wrestlers agreed to let opponents win in crucial matches, knowing favors would be returned later. But while cheating in sumo wrestling tarnishes its honor, the system incentivizes this behavior. Levitt closes with the story of the Bagel Man, a businessman who left his career to sell bagels on an honor system. Customers were asked to leave money in a box. Over time, he noticed patterns: larger offices cheated more than smaller ones, and certain months saw dips in honesty. The lesson? People may cheat, but on the whole, humans are more honest than cynical economists might expect. Incentives are powerful, but they aren't infallible. This chapter explores the power of information asymmetry, when one party knows something the other doesn't and uses that knowledge for their own benefit. Information is power, and controlling it can mean controlling people. To illustrate this, Levitt compares two seemingly unrelated groups: the Ku Klux Klan and real estate agents. In the 1940s, Stetson Kennedy infiltrated the Ku Klux Klan to expose their secrets. The Klan thrived on mystique and secrecy, performing elaborate rituals and using coded language to intimidate outsiders. Kennedy began leaking their secrets, publishing details of their oaths, rituals, and secret handshakes. He even fed Klan code words to radio programs, turning their once-feared symbols into punchlines. Stripped of its secrecy, the Klan lost its power. Its members had relied on controlling information to maintain their influence, and once that control was gone, so was their ability to terrify. Now, what does this have to do with real estate agents? Like the Klan, real estate agents possess valuable information. They know the housing market better than you, and they know how to price, negotiate, and close a deal. You trust them to help you sell your home at the highest possible price. But do their incentives align with yours? Levitt analyzed data from 100,000 home sales in Chicago. He found that when real estate agents sold their own homes, they left them on the market longer and sold them for higher prices, about 3% more. Why? Because the extra time and effort to get a better price benefits them directly. When selling someone else's house, however, the agent's commission only increases slightly with a higher sale price. For example, on a $300,000 home, an agent's take might only increase by $150 for an extra $10,000 in value. To agents, that extra effort isn't worth it, so they encourage clients to accept the first decent offer. This creates a clear conflict of interest. While you want the highest price possible, your agent wants to close the deal quickly and move on to the next sale. It's not that agents are inherently dishonest, but their incentives push them to act in their own best interest rather than yours. The chapter also touches on other instances of information asymmetry. Car salesmen, financial advisors, and even doctors sometimes exploit their informational advantage. However, the rise of the internet has begun leveling the playing field. Information that once belonged exclusively to experts is now widely available. Car buyers can compare prices online, patients can research medical procedures, and homeowners can evaluate real estate trends. Levitt highlights how technology can disrupt traditional power dynamics, empowering consumers with knowledge. Just as Stetson Kennedy used information to weaken the Ku Klux Klan, the internet has made it harder for experts to exploit their informational advantage. At its heart, this chapter reveals that when one group controls information, they wield enormous power. But when that information is shared, the playing field changes. The lesson is clear. Whether you're dealing with a Klan leader, a real estate agent, or a car salesman, knowledge is your greatest weapon. At first glance, the world of drug dealing seems glamorous, dangerous, and above all, lucrative. We're conditioned to believe that drug dealers rake in massive profits, driving expensive cars and living in lavish homes. So why, as Levitt asks, do so many drug dealers still live with their mothers? This chapter dismantles the myth of wealth in the drug trade, revealing a hidden reality that mirrors corporate America more than we might expect. Levitt introduces the work of Sudhir Venkatesh, a curious graduate student who stumbled into a crack cocaine gang while conducting field research in Chicago. Unlike most researchers, Venkatesh gained unprecedented access to the gang's inner workings by befriending its members and leaders. Over several years, he collected data, including financial records, revealing how the gang operated like a highly structured corporation. At the top was the leader or kingpin, who earned significant profits. Beneath him were the senior members, who managed the gang's operations and took home a decent share of the profits. But at the bottom were the foot soldiers, the guys who took the greatest risks by dealing drugs on the streets. Despite risking violence, arrest, or death, these low-level dealers earned about $3.30 an hour less than minimum wage. In essence, the foot soldiers were like unpaid interns, hoping one day to climb the ladder to the top of the organization. This mirrors the structure of legitimate businesses, like a corporation or law firm. Junior employees work long hours for little pay, believing that success lies ahead. But in the crack cocaine trade, the risks are far higher. Venkatesh's data revealed that a street-level drug dealer had a 1-in-4 chance of dying on the job, making it one of the most dangerous professions imaginable. Levitt uses this example to highlight a central theme. Conventional wisdom often obscures the truth. Drug dealers appear rich because we only see the flashy outliers, the few who've made it to the top. But the vast majority struggle in poverty, living with their mothers because they can't afford rent. The chapter closes by connecting this lesson to broader economic principles. People join the drug trade not because it's lucrative for most, but because they see it as a lottery ticket, a small chance at escaping poverty and achieving success. This insight reveals how perceptions of wealth and opportunity drive risky decisions, whether in a gang or a corporate setting. This chapter opens with a puzzling question. Why did crime rates in the United States plummet so dramatically during the 1990s? Throughout the 1980s, crime had risen sharply, and experts warned that a new generation of superpredators would wreak havoc. But instead of spiraling out of control, crime dropped unexpectedly, and no one could explain why. Levitt argues that the true answer lies in an unexpected and controversial factor: the legalization of abortion. Before exploring this argument, Levitt debunks the popular explanations for the crime drop. Many credited innovative policing strategies, such as New York City's broken windows approach, which targeted small crimes to prevent bigger ones. Others pointed to stricter gun laws, increased incarceration rates, or the booming 1990s economy. While these factors may have played some role, Levitt demonstrates that they don't fully explain the timing or scale of the crime drop. Instead, Levitt points to a cause that began 2 decades earlier: the Supreme Court's 1973 decision in Roe v. Wade. By legalizing abortion nationwide, the decision made it possible for millions of women, particularly poor, unmarried, and teenage mothers, to terminate unwanted pregnancies. Decades of research show that children born into adverse circumstances are far more likely to become criminals. Poverty, neglect, and single-parent households create environments that increase the likelihood of criminal behavior. Levitt's argument is simple yet provocative. The children who would have grown up in these challenging circumstances simply weren't born. By the early 1990s, when those children would have reached their late teens and early 20s, the prime years for committing crimes, there were fewer potential criminals in the population. As a result, crime began to decline. To support this claim, Levitt analyzes data showing that crime began to drop first in states like New York and California, where abortion had been legalized earlier than Roe v. Wade. He also demonstrates that the crime drop was most pronounced among cohorts of young men who would have been born after abortion became legal. This argument forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Distant, subtle causes can have profound effects. The legalization of abortion had nothing to do with crime prevention, yet it unintentionally reshaped the future. While politicians and experts credited themselves for reducing crime, Levitt's analysis reveals a far more complex and hidden explanation. Levitt also emphasizes that this insight doesn't diminish the role of other crime-fighting measures. Increased incarceration, for instance, did remove criminals from the streets. However, it's important to recognize that many popular explanations, such as improved policing or a stronger economy, were overstated. The chapter concludes by highlighting how data can challenge our assumptions and reveal surprising connections. Crime didn't drop because of better policing or moral reform, it dropped because a generation of potential criminals was never born. This insight reminds us that human behavior, even at its most troubling, can be influenced by distant and unexpected forces. In this chapter, Levitt and Dubner take on one of the most anxiety-inducing questions of modern life: what makes a good parent? For decades, parenting has evolved from an intuitive art to a science, a field dominated by experts, books, and theories that claim to have the secret to raising successful, happy children. Parents obsess over every decision. Which preschool is the best? How many books should they read to their child? Should they allow TV time? The assumption is clear. Every action a parent takes will have a profound impact on their child's future. But is that really true? Levitt and Dubner cut through the noise by looking at the data. They focus on two key questions. Does good parenting matter? And if it does, what kind of parenting actually makes a difference? To answer these questions, they rely on the Early Childhood Longitudinal Study, a massive dataset that tracks thousands of children from kindergarten onward. The findings are surprising. Many of the things parents obsess over, like buying educational toys, limiting screen time, or reading to their kids every night, show little measurable impact on a child's academic success. Instead, the factors that matter most have less to do with what parents do and more to do with who they are. For example, a child's success is strongly linked to factors like parental education levels, socioeconomic status, and even the age of the mother when she gave birth. These factors are not about day-to-day parenting techniques, but about the broader circumstances into which a child is born. Levitt breaks down 8 factors that are strongly correlated with high test scores and 8 that are not. For example, having books in the home is a strong predictor of academic success, but reading to your child every night is not. Why? Because having books is a signal of an environment where education is valued, an environment that's more influential than the act of reading itself. Similarly, children who attend good schools often perform better, but Levitt argues that it's not necessarily the school itself that matters. Rather, good schools attract good students, which means the children attending them are already set up for success. Another surprising example involves the relative risks posed by guns and swimming pools. Parents tend to fear guns because of their obvious danger, but statistically, a swimming pool in the backyard is far more likely to lead to a child's death than a gun in the house. This insight highlights how fear often clouds judgment. Parents focus on dramatic risks that are easy to imagine while ignoring subtler, more common dangers. Levitt's findings challenge the idea that parenting is about micromanaging every aspect of a child's life. Instead, the data suggests that success is largely determined by who the parents are, not what they do. That doesn't mean parents don't matter. It means their influence lies more in shaping a child's environment and opportunities than in controlling every detail. The chapter concludes with a powerful reminder. Parenting has limits. Despite society's obsession with perfect parenting, children are influenced by countless factors beyond a parent's control. Levitt encourages parents to relax, let go of perfectionism, and focus on creating a supportive, nurturing environment rather than chasing every parenting trend. In this chapter, Levitt and Dubner explore an unusual yet fascinating question. How much does a child's name influence their life? At first glance, this seems trivial. After all, a name is just a word, a label given at birth. But in reality, names carry powerful cultural, social, and economic significance. They can signal a person's background, race, and even socio-economic status. This chapter uncovers what names reveal about parents and whether a child's name can shape their future. Levitt begins with an extraordinary story of two brothers, Winner and Loser. Winner Lane, as his name suggests, seemed destined for success. His brother, Loser Lane, appeared doomed to failure. Yet their lives took the opposite path. Loser grew up to become a successful police officer, well respected by his peers, while Winner's life was marred by a string of arrests and failures. The story illustrates a broader truth. A name may signal certain expectations, but it doesn't determine a person's fate. To dig deeper, Levitt analyzes massive databases of birth records, examining patterns in baby names over decades. One of the most striking findings is the divide between high-end names, those chosen by affluent, educated parents, and low-end names, which are more common among poorer families. Names like Madison or Aiden often start among the upper classes and eventually trickle down to lower-income families. Once a name becomes widely adopted, it loses its exclusivity and falls out of favor among the wealthy, replaced by a new trend. Levitt also highlights the cultural divide in naming practices. For example, African American parents often choose unique, creative names that reflect cultural pride and individuality, names like Deshawn, Tamika, or Roshonda. Critics have argued that these names may hurt a child's prospects in a world where discrimination still exists. Levitt, however, finds that while a name can signal a child's background, it doesn't cause success or failure. Instead, the broader circumstances of a child's life, such as parental education and income, matter far more than the name itself. One powerful example comes from research on resumes. Studies show that identical resumes receive different responses depending on the names at the top. A white-sounding name like Emily or Greg is more likely to get a callback than a black-sounding name like Lakeisha or Jamal. This highlights how names can trigger biases, even though they don't reflect a person's abilities or potential. Levitt's analysis reveals that naming a child is less about shaping their future and more about signaling the parent's identity. A name reflects cultural trends, social aspirations, and the values of the family. For instance, parents who value uniqueness might choose unconventional names, while those who value tradition stick to classics. The chapter also explores the whitest and blackest names in America, showing how naming trends mirror larger patterns of cultural segregation. For example, names like Jake, Molly, and Claire are overwhelmingly white, while names like DeAndre and Ebony are distinctly African American. Levitt concludes with a key insight. A name is a reflection of the world a child is born into, but it doesn't define their future. Parents may agonize over finding the perfect name, believing it will unlock success, but in reality, names are just one small piece of the puzzle. A child's opportunities, environment, and upbringing matter far more than whether they're named Michael or Jamal. Ultimately, this chapter reminds us that while names can signal a lot about identity and background, they are not destiny. The world may judge people based on their names, but the true determinants of success lie in the circumstances and opportunities that shape a child's life. The epilogue of Freakonomics brings us back to the unpredictable nature of life, reminding us that data and analysis can explain patterns and trends, but they can never fully capture the randomness of human existence. It ties together the book's central themes: hidden causes, incentives, and the importance of asking the right questions, while leaving us with a story that underscores the limits of what even the sharpest analysis can predict. The authors introduce two boys, both of whom set out on paths that eventually lead to Harvard. One boy was born into a family that embodied the quintessential formula for success. He was raised in a stable, affluent home where education was a priority. His parents read to him, supported his academic growth, and provided all the opportunities he needed to thrive. From an early age, this boy was set up for success, and it was no surprise to anyone when he was accepted to Harvard. The second boy, however, came from very different circumstances. He was born into poverty, surrounded by crime and hardship. There were no educational toys or bedtime stories in his childhood. Instead, he faced adversity that might have crushed his potential. But through a mix of grit, luck, and perhaps some unseen factors that no dataset could measure, this boy also found his way to Harvard. This story highlights a core truth explored throughout Freakonomics. While data can reveal fascinating patterns and correlations, it cannot always account for the randomness of individual outcomes. People are not mere statistics. Their lives are shaped by a complex interplay of circumstances, choices, and unexpected opportunities. Some children thrive against all odds, while others who appear to have every advantage falter. The epilogue also reminds us that life is filled with outliers, those extraordinary cases that defy expectations. These outliers challenge our assumptions and push us to look deeper. While Levitt's work reveals hidden forces like incentives and economic patterns, the unpredictability of life remains a constant. No model can fully explain why one child overcomes immense obstacles while another struggles despite having every advantage. By sharing these two stories, Levitt and Dubner reinforce a lesson that resonates throughout the book. Data is powerful, but it's not everything. The tools of economics can reveal surprising truths about crime, parenting, education, and human behavior, but they cannot predict individual destinies. The randomness of life reminds us that beyond the measurable factors, there's always an element of chance. In essence, the two boys' paths to Harvard represent the balance between order and chaos. Economic incentives, parenting choices, and environmental factors play a role in shaping outcomes, but they don't dictate them. This is both humbling and hopeful. It means that while circumstances matter, they don't always determine our future. The epilogue leaves us with a sense of wonder about the world. Throughout Freakonomics, we've explored the hidden side of everything, from cheating schoolteachers and sumo wrestlers to the unexpected causes of crime and the truth about parenting. But this final reflection reminds us that even in a world of patterns and incentives, life is full of surprises. As Levitt and Dubner close, they invite us to keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep looking beneath the surface of the world around us. Because while data can answer many questions, the most intriguing ones often remain just out of reach. This concludes Freakonomics, a book that challenges conventional wisdom, uncovers hidden truths, and reminds us that the world is far more complex and fascinating than it seems. If you've enjoyed this journey through the unexpected, keep asking questions and looking at life through a different lens. Thank you for joining me on this fascinating journey through Freakonomics. A rogue economist explores the hidden side of everything. I hope this deep dive into incentives, hidden truths, and surprising connections has made you see the world a little differently. Whether it's why crime dropped in the 1990s, how parenting really works, or why sumo wrestlers and schoolteachers cheat, this book reminds us that there's always more beneath the surface. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more insightful book summaries and deep dives. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below. What was the most surprising insight from Freakonomics for you? Which chapter blew your mind? And if you're hungry for more, stick around. New book summaries and thought-provoking content are coming soon. Until next time, keep asking questions, stay curious, and never stop exploring the hidden side of everything. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.